Good evening. First, I would like to say thank you to all of you for taking the time to come out tonight. I know that I never really knew what human trafficking was or that it happened in our area until I experienced it, and I'm really grateful that everyone is here and wanting to learn more about it. It never ceases to amaze me the way that the Lord works. When I was on the way here, I actually passed through the actual city that I was taken to when I was trafficked, and I had not gone back there. And so it just reminded me that this really does happen in our backyards, and that it's not just something we see on TV, and that it doesn't discriminate. A lot of people think that only people that are homeless or drug addicted or all these different things that we believe, and it's just simply not true. Much like substance abuse, it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. I'll start at the beginning and try not to go too long, but I had two parents who loved me but suffered from substance abuse. So I had a very tumultuous childhood. I went to 13 different schools before I was out of elementary. My dad abandoned me when I was 1 year old. And I lived with my mom, and she really struggled, but she really, really tried. She loved us, and she tried so hard to give us a good life. But unfortunately, the substance abuse took a toll on her to the point where when I was 9 years old, she gave me up as well. I started living with my father again, and he had battled his addictions and got sober at that time. And I ended up living with him and a wonderful angel that he ended up marrying. As I moved on, I didn't realize how much my childhood had affected the systems of development that I was learning, and I didn't realize that it was going to really shape my life there on out. Because I didn't get any attention or love at home, I threw myself into my academics. I was a straight A student, and I was determined that I was going to be somebody. I got straight A's all through school, and I ended up getting a full scholarship. So despite all the different setbacks that I had in my life, it really did strengthen me in a lot of ways. So the problem with that was that behind closed doors, no one knew about the abuse that I was enduring. Because of the way that I grew up, I was desperate for love. I was desperate for attention. So when a family member approached me at the age of 12, I was 12 and they were over 18, for an intimate relationship, I didn't know to say no. It was mostly coercion and love bombing and just giving me all the things that I had never had, but I didn't realize that it was going to really shape my life and my values moving forward. When I got to school, I did really well. I made the dean's list. I worked in the dean's office, and I really was excited because I felt like I had escaped all of the trauma and all of the different things when people saying that I would never make it, that I would never amount to anything, and I really was finally succeeding. I was pre-law and pre-med. I was working in a law firm, and I really was on the right track, or so I thought, and I had surgery on my back at that time. And so we all know what happened next. I became addicted to opiates through a legal prescription. The problem was that for me, it was the answer to all my problems, and I just didn't know it. It gave me the sense of fulfillment that I'd always wanted. It took away the pain that I felt inside, and I didn't know the dangers that lied ahead. In a short amount of time, I ended up being incarcerated, and once you're in the system, you're in the system, and it's a very difficult pattern to get out of. I fought against my addictions, and I fought against the recidivism rate, trying to still make it in life, and I did really well for quite some time. I had gotten a good job and was working, and I gave birth to my first daughter. I was in recovery, and I did all the things right that you're supposed to do. I nursed my daughter, and I was a stay-at-home mom for 2 years, and I just really felt like God had answered a lot of prayers for me. And then when I was expecting my second, I ended up having surgery on my back again. And so again, of course, came the prescription. And I had never dealt with the issues, the underlying issues, and I still didn't have the support system that I really needed. I grew up in church, I sang in the choir, but I never really had a relationship with God. I didn't have faith. I didn't truly believe. I believed that you believed, but I didn't believe. And so it wasn't until I really needed him that I ended up meeting him for the first time. And so as I went on, I ended up relapsing, and I ended up homeless. And so that wasn't something that I had ever prepared myself for. When you see someone on the street corner holding a sign, you think, oh, just get a job, or they're just, drunk or addicted to drugs. And, when I was a little girl, and I never pictured myself being one of those people, but I had gotten to a point in my life where I was so hopeless and I was so full of guilt and shame that I didn't feel the desire to even live anymore. As I went through that period of time, I ended up going to a recovery center, and I was doing really well. I got a pass to go on weekends, and I was at a gas station, and I was in broad daylight, and a van pulled up and took me and sold me. And I didn't know that that happened. I had no idea that, you could be somewhere in public and that someone could take you like that. The attendant, of course, called the police, and they pursued us for a while. But traffickers have this complex system where they will use greed and fear and guilt to control people. And so we're at a time right now where there are more people that are financially insecure than ever. And so if they go to someone and say, hey, I'll give you $5,000 to just tell me when this girl is here, they're not going to think much of it. They're not hurting you. They're not doing anything to you. And so they're a lot more likely to be able to coerce someone in that way. They controlled me through fear. The first thing they did when they took me was take me to an open field and beat me unconscious. And so at that point, I remember knowing that they weren't going to kill me and almost wishing that they would, because I knew what came next was going to be worse than death. And so after that point, I was very afraid. I woke up in the car. I didn't know where we were going, but I do remember seeing that sign on the highway that said Chadburn, North Carolina. So I was taken to a house and I was held. And the thing about trafficking in humans as opposed to substances is that a substance you can only sell once, essentially. Once you sell it and it's used, it's gone. But a person you can sell over and over and over again. And I would say that not greed, but the need for money is so great today that they can use that to their advantage. And then, of course, the shame. When I was in prison the second time, it was during COVID, and we weren't allowed to have books. And so the only book I could have was my Bible. And what a blessing that was. It gave me the opportunity to read it and really read it and understand it and get to know the Lord. And I realized that in the Garden of Eden, the first tool of the enemy was shame. It said that they were naked, but they knew no shame. And as soon as they ate the apple, they covered and they hid themselves. And so I've found that the enemy uses shame in my life more than anything to control me. Even once getting out of my trafficking situation, which again was by the grace of God, I struggled for a long time. I hid who I was. I didn't want anyone to know where I had come from or what I had been through. I found recovery and I found God, and I started working in a little church, and I hid for a long time. It was about at least 2 years. The first year, I couldn't go to the grocery store. I didn't sleep in a bed. I didn't feel worthy of being alive, and I really felt like there was no hope for me, no matter what I did or how hard I tried, that I would never have a real life again. So I worked in Aden, and one day, by the grace of God again, I heard about a place called First Fruit Ministries. It is an organization in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they help survivors of human trafficking. They also help the homeless, and they help feed the community. And what the most amazing part about it was that all the things that disqualified me from everywhere else actually qualified me to work there. All the pain that I had been through finally had a purpose, and it gave me this sense of understanding that I never could have gotten otherwise. I always say that if I had gone on to medical school and become a doctor or a lawyer, that I might have saved lives, but I would have died in sin and shame and guilt and in pride. I never would have known the Lord, and I honestly am grateful today for everything that I've been through. And how is that even possible? I have a relationship with God today that, before you couldn't tell me that he was real, and today you can't tell me that he's not real. You can't tell me that he doesn't exist, because me standing here today is a miracle. There is no way, if you knew me 5 years ago, if you saw me, if you saw the deadness in my eyes, if you saw the 10 years of mugshots and all the things that I went through and all the battles that I faced and tried to do it in my own strength, and I failed every single time. And then God can use anything and just do these amazing things with it. I went and spoke a couple weeks ago and did not want to. I was terrified. As Ed shared, one of the girls I was trafficked with, they thought she was speaking out about what they had done, and they beheaded her. And I watched it, and the fear that they use to control people, and it's not me. I don't care what happens to me. I have 2 beautiful baby girls, and I don't want their lives to be in danger. But I realize that if I don't talk about it and I don't share it, people are not going to understand the reality of it. And I don't want anyone else to have to go through what I went through. So I have to share it. So I will say that God has done incredible things in my life. After being trafficked, or it might have been right before, a lot of that time I've pushed out, but I gave birth to my second daughter. And because of my addiction and because of my homelessness, I gave birth to her in a shed by myself. I had no medical care. I Googled how to clamp an umbilical cord. And God carried me through that. He got us to the hospital, and she was perfectly healthy. And my dad, who never was there for me, he abandoned me when I was 1, ended up caring for that little girl. He changed her diapers, he gave her bottles, and God redeemed that time for her. This morning, I went to the doctor with that little girl while she had her cast cut off. She broke her arm playing with a cardboard box at home. But I was there. I can show up today. I am there for her. And when it says that God will redeem the time and that he will give you back all the things and the desires of your heart, I'm here to say that it's true. It really is. I was talking to a training seminar. They were teaching people that are interacting with survivors how to behave and what they need and that sort of thing. But because I said yes, because I was obedient to God's calling, he answered a prayer for me that I never thought possible. Someone was there that day and they wanted to help, and they asked how they could help me. And they offered me legal counsel to fight for custody of my girls. And I've been praying for that for a long time. Just visitation, just the ability to be able to see my children. And he answered that prayer for me. And I never thought it was possible. If I had not said yes to Ed asked me to speak last year, and I had never shared my story before. I didn't want to talk about it. It's very painful to relive, and it's very embarrassing to get up and talk about the worst things that have ever happened to you. But because I said yes, everything that is, it's the reason I'm here today. It's the reason that I was able to. It gives me a purpose that I never thought possible. Even though I can't be with my little girls right now, God has found another place for me to serve in. I actually volunteer on call at night for a house for survivors of human trafficking. So we have girls that come and they live there, and we give them a year to kind of just restore and heal and get their lives back on track. And I'm there for them, you know, if they have a crisis in the middle of the night, if they set the fire alarm off burning a piece of toast, I am there. I'm the one that answers answers the call, and to have someone who's been there and been through it, it just gives them a sense of peace that's kind of hard to explain. And I don't feel worthy. I don't feel as though I am, able to do anything, but with God, I've been able to do everything that he's called me to do, and he has redeemed every bit of it for me. So I'm just really grateful that you guys are all willing to come here today, and that you care about this issue. We get probably 10 or 15 applications every week from girls who have been trafficked, who are now homeless, who have no one to walk beside them. And I will say that for the 10 years I struggled, it was because I had no one to walk alongside me, no one to tell me that it was okay, no one to tell me that I was worthy. And people would see me on the street or on the corner and they would look away, they didn't want to make eye contact, and I was so ashamed of who I was. And just for someone to look me in the eye and tell me that I was worth something and that I was loved was the thing that I needed most. And so ministries like Changing Destinies and First Fruit, the biggest thing that those organizations do is that they provide hope, and they provide that sense of caring for these people who really feel hopeless. If you do happen to see someone who's standing on the street corner or who's behind bars, I promise you that's not where they intended to go. They weren't little boys and girls hoping to be locked up one day, hoping to be addicted. And I don't make any excuses for what I did. I've done a lot of things wrong. I've made a string of bad decisions in my life. But that's the amazing part about God's grace, is that he gives it to the least of these. He said, ye who are without sin, cast the first stone. That sort of love, that unconditional love, that is life-changing. That is what changed my life. And it wasn't until I needed it, until I was down on the floor with nowhere else to turn, that I turned to him. But once he saved me from everything. I could lose everything today, my house, my car, my job, my things, and it wouldn't change anything at all, because that's not where my worth comes from. And that's not where my fulfillment comes from. I haven't touched a drug since. I haven't thought about it, because I have that emptiness inside of me that was supposed to be there. That's the part that God was supposed to fill up, and I wouldn't let him in. And now that he's there, you can't tell me that miracles don't happen and that he's not real, because I know. And I'm just really grateful to be here today. So thank you.